everyone, it's Erica back on the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel, and today we are going to play with the Love Like No Other set. So I am going to go and grab some tools and then we are going to get making. I am grabbing my Opaque Bright White Superfine embossing powder and also the embossing pad, so the ink pad, and my anti-static tool and my big box of Karin Markers. So I am obviously planning on heat embossing today. So what we are going to do is, first off, we're going to treat our watercolor paper with this anti-static tool. So this is from the Rabbit Hole Designs. It is called the Cottontail embossing tool, I think. It's brilliant, super good and useful, and well worth the money. Let me just say that, because I have really oily fingers and I live in Spain, so it's hot and humid, so you know, that is not conducive to great heat embossing sort of settings. But so yes, definitely get that if you can. And then I'm popping this straight into my Misty, and as you can see, my piece of paper is quite a lot larger than the images, but I have a plan. So I'm going to heat emboss these twice. So I'm going to, first off, I'm going to ink up these two images, and then I'm going to obviously stamp them up, and then I'm going to switcheroo the paper so that I can stamp the other two. Well, I mean, obviously it's the same image, but you know what I mean. I'm going to stamp the same images on the other side of the paper so that I have 4 tulips to color. So one thing I just want to mention as well is if you're having issues with your embossing, you might want to re-ink your embossing ink pad, because a nice juicy embossing pad will make a world of difference. Just trust me on this. So getting a re-inker for that wow embossing pad, it is also a must. And I know it sounds like I'm just saying buy this, buy that, buy this. But some of these things are really worth the money and the investment, and it will just take your card making up a notch. So we are now finishing off this second stamping, and you can see that I have done both layers twice. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sprinkle this giant jar of Opaque Bright White Superfine embossing powder all over this, and then we're going to tap off all of the excess, and there's a lot of excess, but you know, better too much than not enough, right? So I am just making sure that I've got all of the details covered, and then we're going to get our heat tool nice and hot. So it's definitely worth just turning it on and letting it run for like a minute under supervision always, so that it is really nice and hot, and then you put it onto your project. So you can see here I'm using a cork board. It's actually a trivet. So you can buy these at the grocery store or like homeware places, really cheap. And it just, I feel like it's helping bounce back the heat, so I get a really nice even heating. And then I'm going to go straight in with my Karin marker. So I've started with a yellow here, and I'm going to go for quite a springy look. Is that a word? Springy? Was I spring colors? So we're going to go yellow on all of the petals, basically, on all like the little clusters and buds, and the big ones as well. And then we're going to add some sort of oranges and pinks just to kind of, you know, bring in some other colors as well. So I'm kind of outlining first. So yellow is going to be my predominant color, so that's why I'm putting down quite a lot of that to begin with. And then, as I said, we're going to bring in some, like a little touch of orange, and then we're going to top off with a little bit of pink. So I'm not adding any water at the moment at all, like none. It is just straight color right onto the paper. So this gives a really vivid look, really vivid. And if you're quick with your, like when you're adding the colors, you don't need to kind of add any water to blend them. They will blend pretty well. Although I do say that, but it could depend on your paper. So a good quality watercolor paper is also super essential. Yes. So here you can see I am adding a little bit of like hot pink to the top here, just to kind of make them make the flowers pop a little bit. Now because of the heat embossing, you know, it's white, as the name suggests. It's gonna kind of make these look a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Not pale, because obviously there's quite a lot of color there, but they are gonna look slightly less kind of detailed, almost like a softer look. If you want a really nice detailed, kind of sharp details, you're either going to want to heat emboss with a black embossing powder, or you stamp with a black ink first and then you stamp again with a clear, with the embossing ink, and then you heat emboss with a clear embossing ink. So if you don't have a black embossing powder, it's not a problem. Most of us have a black ink, and I will say that if you gave me a choice between buying lots of different colors of embossing pad or embossing powders, or buying lots of different ink pads and then a clear embossing powder, I would 100%, no hesitation, say get the colors of the inks and then get a clear embossing powder, because it is so versatile. You can make stuff shiny, you can emboss over all sorts of different colors, and it's just so much more useful than a colored embossing powder, unless of course you have a favorite color. I mean, there's lots of options out there, but I myself prefer bright white, super fine, and also a clear, and you know, one of my go-tos is rich gold. So I have a few staples that I always make sure that I am stocked up on because I use them all the time. But when it comes to embossing powders that are colored, I'm a little bit more like, it has to bring something to my crafting rather than just kind of being like a color, because I don't find that it's as versatile as having ink pads. So, right, with that, I mean, you might notice here that I have been on screen coloring away, and you know, we're making some progress here. So we are getting different colors onto our tulips here. So we have the last ones are sort of yellow and more orange, and then the ones on the right there are yellow with a little bit more pink. So depending on what you like, you do you. And then I've used the coordinating die cuts, which I have kept together. I don't like cutting my die cuts apart. I try to keep them together whenever I can, because you don't risk losing them. But I have cut them out, and you might notice that there is a third there as well. Yes. So I have quite a few. And now we're gonna pick a background. I have here quite a lot of already kind of pre-made backgrounds where I've been playing around with the latest stencil release from April, and I was kind of, you know, playing back and forth, and I thought this was actually not bad, but they just kind of faded in a little bit, and then this was a bit like, oh, that can work, but you know, I go back and forth, and I make so many backgrounds, I make so many different images, and I in the end, crazily enough, I decided to just pick a new one. Well, bigger, why not? So the one I settled on is I have a really hard time saying this, the Woven Wonder. Woven? No. I might need to go to speech therapy, I can't say this. So the Woven Wonder. No, that's not right either, is it? Oh, but okay. So this one, I'm going to use this one. Right, so this one and the Magic Maze quite quickly became kind of favorites of mine. So, but what we're going to do here, before we do anything else, we're going to add some post-it tape to one side. We're not going to do both sides. We're going to do one side, and then we're going to pop this onto our stencil and secure it in place. And then we're going to get some paste. So I am going to be using some hero paste, and this is, it actually dries kind of whitish. So we're going to take a generous-ish amount, and we're going to spread this all over the whole thing, pretty much. So you're going to want to not go too thick, but also don't go too kind of sparse either. There's a very fine line. But what we're going to do with this, and I have never ever tried this before, we're going to sprinkle a little bit of gold embossing powder on this to make it sparkly. Yes. So I wasn't sure how much to kind of add. So you can see here, I'm kind of adding a little bit, and it doesn't really show that much, but I kind of built it up a little bit. So I started out kind of small, and then I thought, you know what, we need a little bit more sparkles because, you know, who doesn't need sparkles? So I've added these to the paste, and then I have just taken off the stencil, and then I let this dry. Now the stencil itself, I've taken it straight down to my sink, and I've washed it to make sure that it stays, so I can actually clean it off. Now this has been left to dry for quite a while. So this is probably the next day actually. And then I took my heat tool again, and I am going over this panel. And again, I'm using my cork trivet. It just really does such a superb job in bouncing back that heat. And although it's warping a little bit at the moment, it does make a huge difference when it comes to warping in your cardstock when you're heat embossing, because that is a big problem quite often actually when you're doing huge bits of heat embossing. The heat does make the paper warp, but this kind of works really well to counteract that. And I mean, look how cool this is. It just adds that little bit extras, you know. It's not like super in your face. It's mostly white and then a little bit of shine. So this, I was really happy with this. It was a little bit warped, so I'm going to keep it under something flat for a little while. And then when it is nice and flat again, I'm going to add this directly to a card base. So this has been trimmed down a little bit so that it's just kind of leaving a little bit of a white sort of frame. I know it's like white on white, but I thought, you know what, let's do it. It's kind of nice and elegant. And on the back of this, I have added quite a lot of foam tape with some very strange puzzling, but I wanted the entire back pretty much to be covered because I'd used the paste and then done the heat embossing. I didn't want it to kind of buckle and then come loose from the card base. So I thought, you know what, better safe than sorry. And I've added quite a lot of foam tape. And then I've used my grid mat to try to stick this on really nice and flat. And then it was the case of just finishing off the card. So I'm obviously going to add my two flowers, but then with all that white and the white embossing, I just thought, you know, they kind of like, they weren't popping quite enough. So super simple solution. I cut out a little bit of black cardstock, the shiny cardstock. So we are going to add these with a little bit of liquid glue on top, and then they're going to be slightly off center, just tiny bit, just so that you kind of get that black outline shadow to kind of highlight the flowers a little bit. And then we're obviously going to do the second flower as well in the same fashion. And then we're going to arrange these on the card, and then we're going to finish off with a sentiment. Super simple. So this is from the same Love Like No Other set. So this one just says, miss you. And I thought that was kind of sweet. So I'm going to kind of tuck this in so that the flowers kind of wrap around it. Almost like you can see on the packaging that they're facing each other and just kind of making, it's not quite a wreath, but sort of ish, like that. So that is how I'm going to arrange them, like so. And that will also cover up the fact that it was a little bit, the sentiment was a little bit sort of cut off. And then again, a little bit of weight to make sure that it dries really flat. And I could have stopped here, but did I? No, I did not. So I contemplated adding the brand new green peridot opals. And I was also toying with the idea of maybe adding gold or ivory. And I wasn't sure which one was going to fit the best. So I decided to do a little simple test. So I took a few, I took all of them basically, and I put them on the card, and then I gauged, you know, which one looked the best, which one brought the most to the design, which one was kind of enough of a contrast to give that little bit of extra, and which one just kind of disappeared. And quite quickly I realized that the peridot were just not the ones. So then it was down to the ivory and the gold. Which one was going to win out? I was really strongly leaning towards the ivory, but at the last minute, gold took over, and that was it. So I have, you know, probably added quite a few more than normal people would, but I like it. I use these all the time, and I just think it adds a little something, you know. It's what I do. I over bling. It would be kind of crazy if I didn't, you know. If I just started using 3 opals, then you would know that something would be wrong and you should send help. Just a little heads up. But so the card is nearly finished. I am just gonna add these down with a little bit of liquid glue, and that is it. You know, we're finished. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really hope you've enjoyed this card. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up, and I hope I've inspired you, and I will see you again very, very soon.